Okay, hello everyone. So welcome to day 4 of Networks and Dynamical Systems, a workshop organized by Complex Systems and Dynamics Group at Madras. Today we are starting with a tutorial talk. It's going to be given by Dr. Chandan Bose. Dr. Chandan Bose, he is right now a postdoctoral research associate in the Fluid Structure Interaction and Experimental Aerodynamics Laboratory and the Multiphysics and Turbulence Flow Computation Laboratory, Department of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering, University of Liège, Belgium. He obtained his master's and PhD from IIT Madras at the Department of Applied Mechanics. He is passionately interested in fluid dynamics problems of different tastes, especially with flavors of turbulence and nonlinear dynamics. He aims to investigate a variety of complex multiphysics problems involving coupled nonlinear interactions, among which fluid structure interaction and turbulence are his primary research focus. Sounds very interesting, Chandan. So just to add, Chandan was our star student at IIT Madras. So really looking forward to a nice presentation. Over to you, Chandan.
Thank you, ma'am. So let me share the screen. So can you see my slides?
Yes, it's coming, but it's not yet full screen. Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And to start with, I really thank Professor Sain Gupta, Professor Sunetra Sarkar, and other organizers of this workshop for giving me the opportunity to give a tutorial talk. And also thank you very much for the very nice introduction. So just to add with, I am also already an incoming postdoc student to the Vortex Interaction Laboratory in the University of Edinburgh, although I am yet to officially join there. So today my talk would be on the characterization of different dynamical system attractors using nonlinear time series analysis tools. So this talk, as it is a tutorial talk, would not deal much with the underlying mathematics, or I will not really go into the theoretical perspective of these tools because that's a separate uh, area of interest itself. So I would just want to mention that this is a complementary talk to the initial introduction to the dynamical systems given by Professor Sain Gupta, and also yesterday's tutorial to introduction to chaos. And it will be again useful for the upcoming talk of Professor Sunetra Sarkar, where she will be presenting some of the research results using this time series analysis. So, and the next thing is I will keep this discussion very informal. So I am free to be interrupted by you at any point of time. And as I said that the motive of this tutorial talk is to show you online or on the real screen some of the tools and how to use it. And basically, I would try to give as much as direction to the resources possible so that you can go ahead and further read it up and understand and apply these tools to your own research topics. So please feel free to stop me if you have any questions in between. You don't have to wait till the end. Okay, so to start with, what is a dynamical system? As we all know here, it's a closed community. A dynamical system is a system in which a function describes the time dependence of a point in a geometrical space in a very loose sense. So it's not a bookish definition of dynamical systems, but I'm trying to put it into the words so that it is simple to explain. Okay, so what is a function then here meant? I mean a function by a dynamical rule by which this system is governed. So that dynamical rule can be of different types. So first category of these dynamical systems can be the continuous dynamical system, where this dynamical rule is a differential equation. And normally we term these systems in dynamical system literature as flow. And the second type of the dynamical system is discrete dynamical systems, where this dynamical rule is a difference equation. It's a recursive functional relationship, like xn plus 1 equal to function of xn and so on. So this type of dynamical systems are normally termed as map in the dynamical system literature. So now this dynamical system, based on the nature of the problem, it can be either deterministic or stochastic. And next, the deterministic systems can be again linear or non-linear. So in this particular talk, we will be mostly seeing some of the examples of nonlinear dynamical systems and how to characterize their dynamical signatures. Okay. So next comes the geometrical space. So what I mean by a geometrical space is technically termed as a state space or a phase space. And you all know that Henry Poincaré was one of the first pioneer in this field who actually described the dynamical systems in a geometrical sense. Okay. So what do we mean by a state space or phase space? I just want to iterate it here because we will be using this term again and again throughout the talk. So a state space or a phase space is a geometrical space which is contained by the independent state variables, and in any point on the state space or a phase space should describe the systems, all the system state variables and their functional relationship completely. So in this very simple example to start with, in a single degree of freedom, you can see the state variables may be the position of the point or the center of the mass blob which is oscillating, and the velocity. So if you see that this green point is moving with this vibrating blob, and it is describing the position in terms of its phase relationship between the position and velocity. So to more formalize with the definition of a phase space, it's a space with all possible states of a dynamical system, and each state of the system correspond to its unique point in the state space. And a phase portrait in that sense is a plot between the number of independent variables that are required to signify the state of a system correctly. So this example again is the similar to the previous example, and I'm not explaining it further. So let us see some of the examples of this dynamical system. So I will start with a very simple childish equation of a recursive relationship, which is, let's say, a bacteria growth denoted by bn plus 1 equal to function of bn equal to 2bn, let's say 2 times the initial population. So let me know if you can see. I just wanted to use an interactive tool to make you understand this, how the recursive thing is working. Can you see this screen? Can someone tell me if?
Yeah, we could see it.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah.
It's not. One minute. Sorry, give me. Okay. So basically, as simple as it can be, the relationship is just by a constant by the initial population. You can see that as the time increases, if I choose an initial B0 value of 1, it is how the population grows, and it is recursive based on every time step the initial population, and it is changing. So then if I change the initial value, what you can see that it is just scaling, right? So it is nothing rocket science in it. I just wanted to give you a visual feel that how a recursive relationship work. So if I go back to my presentation about the relationship that bn plus 1 is 2 into bn. So now depending on what b0 value or bn value you choose to start with, you can see that it increases, the population increases as a recursive relationship. So this is an example of the discrete dynamical system in a very simplistic sense. Okay, so to go ahead, next we come for a continuous dynamical system, and the simplest example could be a pendulum, and I will not explain the mechanics of it because it's very simple. So the governing equation is something theta double dot equal to minus g by l sine theta, and you can see that based on the initial condition I choose, the phase space, the size of the phase space, or on which the point on the state space move changes. So this is to show that initial condition is actually quite important in this case. And then yesterday you saw the example of a double pendulum. So you can see that this double pendulum system, it's a two body system, and it can go to a series of dynamical transition including chaos. So I will just here would briefly give you some feel of it, how the dynamics changes. So this link I can share in chat. You can play around with yourself later. But this is just to show you how the dynamics changes based on. So here you can see that the state variables are basically theta 1, theta 2, omega 1, omega 2, right? So yesterday you have seen in the introduction to chaos lecture that it can actually go to chaos. So how would the system change? So let's say can you see the screen, the double pendulum animation?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start with a rod 1 length. You can see that the dynamics is still regular, and then if we increase it, the dynamics is completely changing. And also you could play around with the second length and the mass of the system, right? So I will not go into detail here. I will just share this link with you. So if you are interested to understand how the parameters affect the dynamics, you could play around with it. I thought for the beginners this could actually be a very interesting exercise to understand, and it's a very nice tool, and it is not very difficult to code. Since I will show other codes, I will not go into the coding of it. You can actually here see how the face portrait changes as we change the different cases. So let's say here I change in this case, and I make the mass very stiff, and then you can see the face portraits are also accordingly changing. So it is a very nice exercise to play around with it and understand how the trajectory behaves in the phase space of a nonlinear system, and how the system parameters affect the system dynamics. Okay, so without extending it further, I would share this link in the chat, and if you are interested to play around it, you can actually play around it. Here you can see the real life transition of the time history also of the theta1 and theta2 time history and the corresponding phase portrait here, and you can play around with different parameters. This is a nice applet to understand the dynamics. Okay, so without further delaying the introduction, I would now show you some very nice animation that how different various initial conditions affect this double pendulum system. So you can see this animation where the angle 1 and angle 2 are the two state variables, and each of the positions denote the initial conditions of this system in terms of theta 1 and theta 2. And you can see that as time evolves, a certain region of this phase space in this area, it actually remains periodic, whether some of the initial conditions becomes completely chaotic, and it still evolves with time. So it is an example of how the nonlinear systems are sensitive to initial conditions and their dynamics may be completely different, particularly if they are chaotic. So we will simulate some of these systems and see how the initial conditions behave, but this is a very good overall picture to establish this idea. Now you can think that, okay, fine, we are still dealing with a pendulum, double pendulum, and where can we actually see this kind of complexity in real life? Otherwise, what is the point of dealing with all these time series and dynamical attractors and all? So I will next, before going into directly going into the coding part, I will show you one example of a real life scenario where you can see such complexity. So this video is very much hypnotic to me, at least. It shows a herd of deers dancing in a circle in northwestern Russia, and you can see that they are behaving as a dynamical system altogether. It's a very complex system with some underlying, I would say they can be modeled with some underlying laws, but it's very difficult to establish that. But you can see that how in real life a swarm of living bodies or a swarm of system can also see. So we all know that a flock of birds, a swarm of fish swimming, and but this is another example to which we could relate to these things, that why we are really interested in this kind of complex nonlinear dynamical systems. So next, going into the bifurcation and different dynamical transition route. You all know that a bifurcation occur when a small change made to the parameter value of a system, which we call a bifurcation parameter, causes a sudden qualitative or topological change in the behavior. So this is an example of a bifurcation diagram of an aeroelastic system where the flow velocity is the bifurcation parameter. So in the x-axis, if you can imagine, the x-axis is not given, sorry. So if we increase the flow velocity, we can see that the dynamics of the system, qualitatively the nature of the dynamics changes from a period 1, then a period 1 with harmonic solutions, then it suddenly jumps to a chaotic regime, and then a lot of other things happens. So this is just to motivate you like what a bifurcation means. So this shows a qualitative change. Now through these bifurcations, okay, so another example I would give. So let's say here kh is basically means the dynamic plunge velocity, which is a parameter in this flow field simulation, and which is considered as a bifurcation parameter. So you can see that at kh equal to 1, we see a periodic wake, and then when we increase the value of it, the flow field dynamics completely transitions to chaos. So we of course know that some kind of bifurcation has happened, and we are already, without establishing what is periodicity, what is chaos, we are terming it at this stage in the light of that, they are each of them are basically they are individual dynamical attractors or dynamical states. And in this talk, we will see some of the tools how to characterize these states. Okay. So since this transition has happened, there should be some underlying bifurcations, right? So this particular dynamical transition from order to chaos or periodicity to chaos can happen through two different established routes. One could be a local bifurcation route, which can happen through period doubling, quasi-periodic transition, or intermittent transition. And the other is a global bifurcation route, which can happen through crisis or some of the underlying homoclinic bifurcations. So you can go through these textbook to actually read further on this. So I would not define each of them separately. Okay. So now see some of the canonical dynamical system. If we see, we all have, if we have done the dynamical system course, we learned about all these bifurcations through the very canonical system, which is called logistic map in the discrete dynamical systems. And this is a relationship which has applications in many many physical problems such as population dynamics and others. So this is actually governed by Sn plus 1 equal to mu into xn of 1 minus xn. So here to note that mu is the system parameter, right? So system parameter, I mean, it is the bifurcation parameter or control parameter. So by changing this mu, we will see what kind of transition happens in the dynamical systems. Okay, so I will show you the code and we'll play around with briefly because discrete dynamical system is not the focus of this talk. We will very fast move into the continuous dynamical systems. But just to introduce you with the concept of transition, I put it forward that this is a dynamic, this is the cobweb plot or the orbit diagram for these discrete dynamical systems, where I see here x is the first independent parameter and f of mu basically is the x n plus 1, and mu is basically the bifurcation parameter. So here you can see the bifurcation diagram where if we vary mu, we could see several such transition or underlying bifurcations through which it basically goes from order to chaos. Okay, so first we see here a period doubling cascade, and then we see in between intermittency, and then finally through many other transition it goes to a robust chaotic regime. So I will come to the code of it and how to code it. I will show you and play around with the parameters briefly. But before that, let me define some of the canonical dynamical systems in the continuous sense, which are governed by differential equation. Okay, this window is interfering. Okay, so when we actually model continuous dynamical systems in terms of differential equation, and next we are going to simulate it, then one problem comes up, whether the differential equation is basically stiff or non-stiff, and depending on that we have to choose the numerical integration techniques in the computational perspective to make the solution stable. So what do we mean by stiff and non-stiff equation? A stiff differential equation is normally in loose sense can be defined as based on the differential equation coefficient which becomes unstable for some particular numerical approach unless the step of the numerical integrations are is very, very fine. So I choose MATLAB as the demonstrating platform for this particular tutorial talk, hoping that MATLAB is accessible to you all and it's easy. You can always do it in Python or other programming languages. So in MATLAB, for solving these stiff and non-stiff equations, we have different numerical integration techniques. So this talk will be mostly focusing on the non-stiff equations, and we will use a numerical integration solver called ODE45, which is based on the hybrid Runge-Kutta fourth and fifth order technique. And also an important aspect here is the tolerance. So we will see how the tolerance of this numerical integration technique can actually make your system solutions very different, particularly when we are working with chaotic system. So we will be simulating some of this canonical dynamical system. To start with, we'll be simulating Duffing equation, then we will see van der Pol equation, and then we will see Lorentz equation. And I will choose this Lorentz equation to show you one particular route to chaos, which is intermittency route to chaos we see in this system. And then I will also show you the very popular nowadays, this population model in respect to COVID, or there are a lot of modified forms of it, but the basic canonical form is the SIR model. So we will show this, simulate these models. Okay, so I will stop my presentation screen at this stage and go to MATLAB, and we will do some simulations. So does anybody have any questions at this stage? Because I cannot see the window or anything. Okay. So should I
Chandan, can you
continue?
read the chat box?
No, just give me a minute.
There has been some discussion, I see.
I think if I don't stop sharing screen, I can't see it. Okay, let me stop sharing screen. Okay.
So what I can also, I request the audience to raise their hand if they want to interrupt you and have a question right there.
Yes,
so then
yes.
one of us can unmute and they
Yes,
can ask
because
it right away.
I can't see the chat box. I request you to raise your hand so that we can face-to-face discuss. I will prefer that. Okay. So what is the confusion? Mu and R. Okay, so I may have written somewhere R or somewhere mu. Sorry for that. Yeah, mu or R is the same. It's the system parameter which we are varying to get the bifurcation diagram, or to see what kind of transitions happening in the system for the logistic map. Okay. So should I continue, or anybody want to ask any question? Okay, so I will continue then.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let us do some simulation or exercise, some basic simulation. So first, as I said, that discrete dynamical system is not the focus of this tutorial, but I will show you just to introduce how we simulate discrete dynamical system. So I will not get time to go line by line of the code, but I can share all this code to you after the talk and you can play around yourself. But I will just mention some of the basic principles that are used in this code. So here you can see that this is the main recursive relationship of logistic map that I was talking about. It's mu into xn into 1 minus xn, and this is xn plus 1 basically. And then now in this case, in this code, what I am doing is I am actually trying to code the evolution of the orbits of this logistic map for a particular let's say system parameter. Okay, so I have chosen some representative system parameters. So let's see with 2 what happens. So if I choose the system parameter mu equal to 2, then how I will see the evolution of the system in terms of the cobweb plot or the orbit diagram. So let's see if it runs properly. Okay, so I hope that you can see the MATLAB figure. Yes, somebody, yes or no?
Yes, we
The
can see it.
yeah, okay. So in this particular case at mu equal to 2, what you see that, so basically you can understand this parabolic structure is actually the functional form of the logistic map, and this is a diagonal line, and x-axis is the x starting xn, and f mu is nothing but xn plus 1. Okay, so we started with some point here, then we evaluated the functional value, and the same functional value is used for the next recursive step. So it comes here and then goes here, then this, and ultimately it actually uh, stops here. The iteration stops here because it reaches to a fixed point. Okay, so now if I actually use something uh, 3.5 maybe, and then I do it, I would see a periodic evolution. Okay, so this orbital evolution goes and ultimately it basically evolves here in this stage, and slowly as I have shown you the bifurcation diagram, I will generate that again. As we increase this mu value subsequently, we will see some transition. So let us try the last value, 4. So to mention here that this parameter for this particular logistic map equation, the parameter value is bounded between 0 to 4, and my the starting value can be from 0 to 1. Okay, so for mu equal to 4, uh, I actually presume that we all know logistic map evolution. We should actually see chaos here. So yes, so for mu equal to 4, you can see that this evolution of the orbits or the cobweb plot is unpredictable, and it goes on and on. So if we now go back to the bifurcation diagram, which I have coded here. So for this bifurcation diagram, what I do is I actually consider 100 iteration. To you can increase it further, but since I'm doing it in laptop, I consider 100 iterations and consider the last 30 iteration to decide on the to refine my points on the bifurcation diagram. And my parameter or r here, or it should be mu actually, it goes from 0 to 4 with an interval of 0.005, and I give a starting value here, and then I iterate and evaluate this functional relationship to plot the bifurcation diagram. So if I run this bifurcation diagram, should not take much time. Yeah, yeah. So this gives me the evolution of the dynamics. So you can see that first when I tried with 3.5 almost here. So if we do the mathematics, we would see that there the transition happens, and below that below that we get a periodic solution, and when we tried with 4, we see a complete chaotic band in this region, right? And yeah, so it is pretty easy to code this, so I will not spend much time on it because that's not the focus of this. So I want to highlight that at 3.8282, this is a particular important value because there we see an intermittent transition. Okay, so you can try with this value and can plot the time history. I could plot the time history here also, but I did not. uh, you can easily plot the number of steps versus this x evolution or t evolution here. Okay, so yeah, so that's fine. So this is the logistic map, which is a discrete dynamical system, and we could code it very easily to see the bifurcation diagram. Okay, so before going further, any questions or anybody want to clarify something in the chat? Nothing is there. Okay, so I will continue again. Yeah, so now basically this particular tutorial and the characterization through different time series tools will mostly focus on the continuous dynamical system. And as I have already shown you that I will first simulate and show you how to use ODE45 and simulate this Duffing equation and see different dynamics. And we will do the same for all, and then slowly we'll go to the route to chaos part. Okay, I am actually going a bit slow, so I would rush. Okay, so first comes the Duffing equation. So from the governing equation, you can see that the Duffing parameter, or the system parameter, I would say the coefficient, I have coded it here as epsilon, which I have taken as 3. And then we have chosen a T span within which I will simulate the system. And then I have decided some initial condition because it's an initial value problem. And it's a force Duffing equation. So F is the forcing amplitude and omega is the forcing frequency. And then I am actually solving this Duffing equation. So you can see that I have used a different ODE solver, ODE 113. You could use ODE 45 and then compare the solution. So okay, so this is the important thing I was trying to mention, that I have used a relative tolerance of 1 e to the power minus 13 and an absolute tolerance of 1 e to the power minus 14 in this case. So slowly I will show you how these tolerances can affect the system response. Okay, so let us just, I hope that there would be no confusion in this code. It is a very simple and straightforward code. So if I run this, okay, so I get a time history and a phase portrait from this equation. Okay, so the time history is x versus t and the phase portrait is x and x dot. Okay, so this is how we simulate dynamical system, and then we are slowly going towards the tools which we will use to characterize these dynamics to conclusively prove whether they are periodic or whether they are non-periodic. If they are non-periodic or aperiodic, what is their signature, whether they are uh, chaotic or something else like quasi-periodic or intermittent. Okay, so here again I will show you how to plot the Poincare section for this Duffing system. So again I have taken gamma, or the epsilon is the system parameter here, and then the equation here is basically the function in the functional form I have written in the state space form, where x1 dot equal to basically y is equal to x1 dot equal to x, and then the next equation comes as x of 1 and 0.3 x2 and x1 cube, and gamma is the parameter, sorry, gamma is the forcing amplitude here, and 0.3 1 is the cubic coefficient and 0.3 is the linear coefficient, and cos omega t, where omega is 1.25, is the forcing frequency. So if I am actually a bit confusing, so I'm going here. So gamma is f here and omega is the forcing frequency, and epsilon is considered 1 here and the coefficient of x is 0.3. So I have chosen these parameters to reach to some of the dynamical states that I want to show you, which is chaos. Okay, so this is the equation of the Duffing equation. And then you can see that in this case, I have chosen ODE 45 solver. So I did that intentionally to show you that there can be different ODE solvers, and based on the stiff or non-stiff equation or based on the tolerance value, you might have to choose it and validate it properly before just trusting your results. And in this case, I have used a relative tolerance of 1 e to the power minus 4 and absolute tolerance of 1 e to the power minus 4, same. And then I have just plotted. So let's see what I get. So I have chosen a certain parametric space where I reach chaos. And this is the phase portrait where you can see clearly two whales and some of the trajectories covering both the whales, and this evolves completely in a chaotic manner. So how do we prove that it is chaos? That is the objective of this lecture. So the first tool I would be showing you here is the Poincare section to plot the strange attractor. So what do we mean by the strange attractor? So by strange attractor, we mean that it has a fractal dimension, which means that the trajectories will evolve in a completely unpredictable manner, but they will be confined within a volume in terms of an attractor with a fractal dimension, with a dimension or correlation dimension, which is fraction. Okay. So to plot the Poincare section, we use a stroboscopic way. What do I mean by a stroboscopic way of plotting a Poincare section? That means that we consider a plane in the phase space in terms of the period of the forcing in the system. So in this particular case, I have the forcing frequency in terms of omega is 1.25. So my time period here is 2 pi by 1.25. So I will cut the trajectories in each period and see how those points in the phase space behaves, and they will eventually form the attractor. So you can see that I am again solving this equation, but in the time I have considered this 2 pi by 1.25, which is the capital T, and then I'm going up to some next time to capture all the points. That's all. Then I'm plotting those points in the phase space in a stroboscopic manner. So I think I've closed this figure. So if I run it again, I have it. And then if I use hold on and then plot the figures over this, I think yes. So now you can clearly see the strange attractor, and if I just edit the figure a bit, it will be more clear. But in the phase portrait, you can see that all the stroboscopic Poincare section shows you the presence of a strange attractor, which is the signature of chaos. And as I go ahead, I will show you more tools to characterize chaos. Okay, fine. Fine. So now once, okay, phase portrait Poincare section I've already shown you. Now the next dynamical system we can exactly similarly simulate. So I will skip this as I'm actually running late. So basically, as I have shown you in my presentation, so a van der Pol equation is actually governed by this kind of differential equation. So we can actually code it using ODE45 and simulate the dynamics of it. So I will now quickly move to the Lorentz equation, where I will show you an interesting route to chaos. So quickly, if you have any if you need any clarification or if you have any queries. Ma'am, somebody has raised his hand.
Yeah, I have unmuted Aditya.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I wanted to ask, like, so you said like we can have separate dynamical systems like periodic, aperiodic, or a system which is chaotic. So can
Yes.
there be any sort of forcing which helps us to make dynamical system move from one to the other? Like, can the shift be possible from one dynamical system to the other, and how can that be depicted? That my system has moved, say, from a periodic state due to some sort of a forcing into a chaotic state.
Yes, of course. So it depends on the type of the dynamical system, whether it is autonomous or non-autonomous. Okay. So as you said, yes, forcing amplitude could potentially be an important system parameter which drives the system to undergo transition from periodicity to chaos or any other thing. So the example I showed, it's a force Duffing equation, right? So you could see that the forcing amplitude and frequency was there, so I could actually vary my dynamical system parameter considering forcing amplitude to be a bifurcation parameter, and indeed you will see a period doubling cascade in Duffing equation. So it can be, again there can be other type of system which does not have forcing, which are unforced system. Even then, like the van der Pol equation, unforced Duffing or van der Pol equation, you could consider some other system parameter which is in terms of, it is implicitly a parameter of the system but it's not the forcing, that could also drive the system from one state to the another. So both are possible. Am I clear, or did I answer your question? So next I will be showing the Lorentz system, where you would see that there is no forcing, but I would be changing a system parameter which is a coefficient of the Lorentz equation, and by changing that I would show you how a system goes from periodicity to chaos through a intermittency route. So that would probably make more sense to you. Okay, so I would continue then. Okay, so next I would, so I'm skipping this population model here. It's not very interesting because it's the same. You can use ODE45 to actually model the equation and then simulate. So let me go into the Lorentz equation. And yes, so here you can see that I have written a MATLAB function, nothing very fancy about it. So in the Lorentz function, I have actually given the Lorentz equations that I can show you again. So it's x dot, it has three state variables, x, y, z, and it has its derivatives x dot, y dot, and z dot. And you can see that there are three system parameters here that I was talking. One is sigma, another is rho, another is beta, related to each of these differential equation, x dot, y dot, and z dot. So what I will do is I will keep two of these system parameters constant, and I will vary this row here, and I will show you how a system can undergo transition. So that is the objective. And you can see that here I have fixed the first, so I have created a y vector. So it has three state variables x, y, z, and I have coded it as a array, as a vector. So the first system variable I have kept it constant at 10. The second system variable I will vary, so I have declared it as a global variable r. And in the third, again, the third system variable, I have kept it constant at 8/3. Okay. So again, I will do the same thing, use ODE45, and yes, so this is my system parameter here, which I'm naming as AA here. I don't know why, but for some reason. Okay, it's a variable. Then I am actually denoting R equal to A of I. So my objective here was to run a for loop and do simultaneously the calculation for a series of parameters, but uh, I will start with one value. So let's say my first value is 166, and I'm simulating the system from 0 to 120 second or unit of time, and then I'm running a for loop and solving the ODE, and plotting the time history and the phase portrait. Okay, so let us see first for 166 what happens. Okay, so this is the time history and this is the phase portrait, you can see. So you can see that for 166, after a bit of transient, we reach to a periodic attractor, and if I zoom it, it's completely periodic. And yeah, if I remove the transient part in the phase portrait, I would also get a periodic, completely periodic attractor. So I will show you later how to do it, but from the time history, at least it is very clear that it's a periodic, it's a periodic attractor. So now this I'm considering as my bifurcation parameter. So now I will change it to 166.15 because I know that there would be a transition at this point, and we will see what kind of transition happens. So in this case, we see an interesting dynamics, which basically would be clear if I zoom it a bit. So you can see here that there are a cluster of periodic, it's not cluster, periodic dynamics, and that is interrupted. Yeah, and that is interrupted. This periodic dynamics is interrupted by sporadic aperiodic windows, and those appearance of those aperiodic windows are itself very unpredictable. They are happening not so periodically. So this dynamics, where it is an interplay of two different kind of dynamics, in this case it is periodic and chaotic or aperiodic, I would say here, it's called an intermittent state. Okay, so we saw that as we changed the system parameter, we reached from a periodic state to an intermittent state, which is of course a bifurcation leading to chaos, I would say, which we'll see in a while. So if I make it 168, I will see a completely chaotic emergence, which is very much unpredictable. Okay, so if we zoom it a bit, we would see it is completely unpredictable, and we could show here that if we gradually change the system parameters, we will see that the frequency of those sporadic bursts will increase and will lead to a robust chaos like this. So this is basically known as the type 1 intermittency route to chaos in the dynamical system literature. So now you can see that even if there is no forcing present, we could see a transition to chaos. Okay, so now basically, before I forget, I wanted to show you that how this tolerance can affect the system. So the same Lorentz system here I have coded, and I will run it and show you if I choose two different tolerance values in this ODE solver in the chaotic state, it can change the dynamics completely because it will change the initial condition in some sense, right? So let me run it. Oh, I am in wrong folder. Okay, this code is here. Okay, yes. So now, as I have shown that in some parameter we see chaos, and you can see here that these two are for two different relative tolerance. One is 1 e to the power minus 3, another is 1 e to the power minus 6. And we can see that initially, although they started in a similar way, slowly we see a sensitivity to initial condition and an exponential divergence, which is again the characteristics of chaos. So when you are dealing with such chaotic system, it's very important to fix your tolerance even. You cannot use different tolerances for different cases. Your system dynamics will evolve completely differently. That was the motive to show this here. Fine. So okay, Again, I will pause a bit and ask you if you have any doubt here. Any queries required? Okay, ma'am. So I have half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this stage, I have introduced to you how we simulate the canonical dynamical systems and how we can vary the system parameters to see what kind of dynamical transition can happen, and that can happen in a local or a global sense. So next, I will basically introduce you in next half an hour. I will show you the time series analysis tools and how to use them to characterize these different dynamical attractors. So let me share my screen again and okay. Okay. So just to briefly motivate this, this is from our ongoing research work with Professor Sunetra Sarkar and Deepanjan, one of my colleague there. So I would show you that it is a different. So you have now seen the intermittency route to chaos, but there could be another local transition route to chaos, which is quasi-periodic route to chaos. And here we simulate the unsteady flow field around flapping wing, which is undergoing combined pitching plunging kinematics, and you can see there is a phase difference, and we consider this phase difference here to be a bifurcation parameter to see how the system dynamics changes. And the system parameters remain constant for all the cases, like Reynolds number is 300 and the reduced frequency K is 4 and the pitching amplitude is 15 degree here. So as you see that initially in a particular case, we see completely periodic wake, which is known to be a deflected wake, but its dynamics, I will show you the time histories, they are completely periodic in nature. And then here it's another representative case for a different phi value where we see quasi-periodic dynamics, in the sense that the near field vortex structures are marginally changed from one cycle to another cycle, but they remained confined within the neighborhood. And then for another representative case, we see that the system undergoes a completely unpredictable evolution of the flow field, which we characterize as a chaotic signature. So this is the physical system from which time histories I will analyze, and I will show you how to characterize them as a periodic, quasi-periodic, and a chaotic signature. Okay, so now time series analysis is, I would say that it's a way of analyzing a sequence of data points collected over an interval of time. So the tools that I'm going to introduce to you are this. So first comes the time frequency analysis. So an important aspect of a time history or time series is that what are the frequency scales present in the time history. So before going into that, an important aspect is moving average, which is an important tool, especially when you get some data from experiments or your simulation results are not smooth enough. So there would be some unnecessary noisy part or some spurious component of the time history which is not physical. So that if you don't make it smoother using this moving average technique, you might get a wrong impression of the dynamical signature. So once we do that, once we make the time history smoother, removing the spurious component of it by moving average, we do a frequency analysis and time frequency analysis by using the Fourier transform analysis and wavelet transform analysis. And then in most of the cases, our time history that we obtain from either from experiment or simulation for complicated real life scenarios, they might not even have the higher derivative presence to construct the phase space. In that case, we have to construct a pseudo phase space through using the technique of phase space reconstruction. I will come in a while about the details of it. And then we can use the recurrence measures and different topological invariants of the attractor to characterize what type of attractor it is. And finally, if time permits, I will show you one example of synchronization and how to see if two different time series is synchronized to each other or they are out of sync or not by using Hilbert transform. Okay, so as I said, the first component is the time frequency. So first we will do moving average and then we will use the time frequency analysis. So let me show you this particular time series data of these simulation results, and then I will show you how to characterize them. So yes, so before I proceed further, let me clear the screen and clear all the variables. And I have now saved the data of that. So I have now the coefficient of lift, coefficient of drag, and the time data from the simulation, and this is for the periodic case. So first thing, as I said, I will do moving average. Okay, so for that, okay, so once it is there, so for moving average in MATLAB we use a smooth command, and I will show you and this 10 and 20. So basically we can smooth our CD time history by using this smooth command in MATLAB, and this 10 and 20 are basically denotes, or they attribute to the number of points that we take into consideration for doing this smoothing average. So if I do this exercise and plot three different type of smoothing, so if I actually zoom a bit, yeah, please let me know if it is clearly visible or not. Okay, so here you can see that this blue, red, and orange, they are three datas with the blue one is exactly without doing the moving average, which you can see that since it is the raw data obtained from the simulation, has these spurious oscillations, and that attributes to the different numerical techniques that you consider. So in this particular case we used immerse boundary method, and which is known to give such unphysical spurious oscillation which we need to smooth through this moving average technique. Then you can, if I zoom it, you can see that these spurious oscillations are reducing as we increase the number of points considered for this moving average. And finally, if I see the full time history, okay, and see the final form of the smooth time history, you will see that it is fine. It is quite nice and containing the frequency scales that are physical in nature, and they are not spurious at all. Okay, so this was the moving average technique to show. Now I will do the time frequency analysis, and basically for that, first I have to decide what is the what is the known frequency scale. Since it is a forced flapping case, we have a particular flapping frequency, and I am calculating the time period as this because my reduced frequency is 4, which is equal to the omega. So I am calculating the time period here, and based on that we will do the other calculation. So before calculating the Fourier transform and wavelet transform, I will first make the time step uniform and interpolate this data. accordingly. And yes, so this is the periodic time history with a very low modulation. I'm considering it to be a periodic time history with a period to signature of CD, you can see, and we will analyze this time history considering it to be a periodic time history. Okay, so this is now with an uniform time step. So you can see that, yeah, you can see that I have chosen a sampling frequency of 1 over 0.01, so 100. So this will be useful for our further analysis. And now if I use the FFT command of MATLAB, so MATLAB has a FFT command itself. However, we have to take care of the Nyquist frequency, which is basically half of the total sample time. And so you have to be careful choosing that frequency to plot the FFT diagram. And it is as simple as that using the FFT command of MATLAB. So if I plot the frequency spectra, you will see that, yes, so this is in semi-log, but in the normal plot, you can see that these are the two dominant frequency. So for comparing with the wavelet, I will now just see what are those frequencies are roughly. So one is roughly 2.01 and the other is 1.005. So you can see that it is a subharmonic of this. So, and it is much clearer in the semi-log plot. So this way I do the first get to know the dominant frequency scales of the system, and then but this will only give us an averaged picture or averaged signature of the system, because these frequency scales might also change with time, right? So we now need a time frequency diagram, that how this frequency scale change with time, or do they change or not. So for that we will do a wavelet analysis, which is basically, yeah. So in MATLAB, for this kind of oscillating time series, there are different type of wavelet transform available, like Fourier transform. We can go for discrete wavelet transform or continuous wavelet transform. For this kind of oscillating time signature, we take the Morlet wavelet function, which is also called the Gabor wavelet function, and use the command of continuous wavelet transform or CWT in MATLAB. So this has a basic fundamental wavelet structure like that, which is a combination of exponential and the Gaussian curve. You can actually go to the mathematical description of it in the MathWorks website. And we use that to get this time evolution of the frequency structure, which now I will show you, but the results is like that. So corresponding to these two dominant frequency, we see two frequency bands over time in the wavelet transform. So let's do that. So yeah, here you can see that first I have the sampling time and the interpolated data here, and I am basically using this continuous wavelet transform function over some range of frequency scales that needs to be adjusted based on your system frequency, and that rest of it's plotting. It is as simple as that. And if we run this, I hope we'll get something. Yeah, so we see that we get a spectrogram, or it's called scaleogram, where we get the frequency data versus the time. And please excuse me for this level things, but just let's focus on the two frequency values. If I zoom this to here, you can see that, yes, so I hope we get this. Okay, I think these tick levels are not correct properly, but yes, I can assure you that these two frequency values are corresponding to the dominant 2 frequency present in the time history. So this, since my code is not formatted properly, this just ignore these tick levels, it might not exactly show the correct values. Okay, so this is the time frequency analysis. So next, so next is what is most important and interesting part is the phase space reconstruction. So briefly for a few seconds, I will ask you if you have any question. Do you have any queries till now? No, I guess.
I don't see any questions in the chat box, John.
Okay, so should I continue? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So next part is the phase space reconstruction. Once we know the frequency scales and the time evolution of the frequency scales of our system, we now want to see the evolution of the system trajectories in the phase space, right? But why do we really need it? If we really have the true state variable values, like as I said for the Lorentz system, or showed you that x dot y dot z dot, 3 state variable values and their derivatives, if we have it, we really do not need this technique. However, in most of the cases, as I mentioned, that we obtain time series data in a scalar form, that either from experiments or it can be from our simulation, where we do not have a perfectly closed form equation and we are simulating it. So in that case, like let's say this drag time history, we really do not have a CD dot value from the governing equation. We do not get it because these are the derived quantities from the direct flow field variables, right? So for those kind of thing, if I really want to understand what kind of attractor this CD time history forms in the phase portrait or phase space, I really need this technique to form a pseudo phase portrait. It is called pseudo because it is a numerical technique by which we are constructing pseudo state variables for the higher derivatives. So let's say I have a x of t state variable, which let's assume it's a drag time history, but I want to construct these two axes with higher derivatives, but we don't have the derivative value. So in that case, we use Teken's delay embedding theorem, and which consists of two steps mostly. So first we have the input time history, then we have to find an optimum time lag. Okay, so that this optimum time lag will form the time delayed vectors, which will minimize the dependency between these delayed vectors. So as if we are making these time delayed vectors. So if we have xt and this tau is the optimum time lag, if we find it in such a way that xt plus tau and xt plus 2 tau, they are the time delayed vectors and they becomes independent. So they forms the basis of the systems, three different bases. So we can actually form a pseudo phase portrait considering them as the state variable. So for that, we actually use, there are a few established techniques to find this optimum time lag. However, the most established technique or most commonly used technique, I would say, is the method of average mutual information, which is nothing but comes from the probability theory or information theory. So we calculate I of tau, which is an information based on tau, and we see when this information variable becomes the minimal at the first stage, and we consider that lag to be our optimum time lag. Okay, so there is another common and crude way of finding it, which by autocorrelation function. However, autocorrelation function are mostly gives very accurate results for linear systems. For nonlinear systems, it in some cases does not give us the correct result. So we use this method of average mutual information, and I give you all the further reading references to go into the original paper and understand how the algorithm works. And the second important information that we need is the minimum embedding dimension. So the minimum embedding dimension is the variable by which we know what is the minimum dimension of the phase space we need to completely understand the evolution characteristics of the system state variables. Okay, and we use in this talk I will show you, we use the method of false neighborhood to find this minimum embedding dimension. So now I would direct you to these original resources or original research papers to understand exactly what is the algorithm or the mathematical formulation of it. But let me give you an essence of the underlying principle. So the method of average mutual information, as you understand, it comes from a probability, a conditional probability value of a system state variable or a point in the phase space to have this at the instant of this S function and after a tau where it will be. So that conditional probability gives the mutual information between the states in with a time lag of tau, and we want to minimize it to minimize the dependency of the state variables. Whereas method of false neighborhood ensures us that the position of 2 points in the phase portrait for different higher dimensions. So let's say we start with embedding dimension 2 to 10. As we go ahead and increase the dimension of the phase space, the position of 2 points on the state space should be invariant. And what is the minimum dimension we need to make them invariant? For the lower dimensions, for a chaotic system, let's say, where if we start with 2, we will see if we go on increasing embedding dimension 3 to 4 and 5, we will see that the position of those 2 points are changing. They are not invariant. So that means that they are not sufficient enough to capture the whole dynamics of the system. So this is the so it calculates the false percentage of false neighborhood points, and we keep on increasing the embedding dimension till we reach a 0 value of false neighborhood, where the distance between 2 points remains invariant. Okay, so very briefly, this is the background, and I will show you an example here that so we are plotting this information versus the delay time lag, and we see the first minimum is considered to be the optimum time lag. And then if we plot the percentage of, again, false neighborhood, we see as we increase the embedding dimension, at some point it goes and becomes 0, where it ensures that the distance between 2 points becomes invariant. And now once we found this tau and minimum embedding dimension, we can plot it. So it may be CL or CD, we can plot and see that how the nature of the attractors changes. Okay, so the first, it shows a one-dimensional isolated trajectory or attractor. It is a limit cycle oscillation, or it may not be limit cycle, but it's a periodic attractor. Then it takes a toroidal shape, and then it becomes a completely chaotic attractor. Well, so this is briefly about phase space reconstruction, and I will quickly show you how we do that. Okay, yeah. So basically, as in the reference, I have mentioned that there is a very nice tutorial paper by Professor Sujit in Annual Review of Fluid Mechanics, which contains all these phase space reconstruction code snippets that I'm going to use, and I will share that paper so that you can also use the same codes to play around with it. So here, in the first step, as I said, I'm using the average mutual information code based on that probability function, and I need basically here I need the interpolated data and the maximum number of lags, let's say, that I want to plot this information for. So let me see, I have the inter data here already. So let me see what it gives. Okay, so here you can see that it's a plot I versus tau, and you can see that it is changing, but the first minima here around 12, very roughly, I get the first minima, and which I consider to be my optimum time lag. Okay, so now my first goal is achieved. Next, I need the false neighborhood percentage and the minimum dimension, minimum embedding dimension. For that, again, I need the interv data. So basically here, please give your attention that we just need a scalar time history for doing this analysis. We don't need any other information. So for interp data, and then we need the sampling frequency here. This Fs is the sampling frequency, and as I showed you before, in the FFT during interpolating, I considered a sampling frequency of 100. Okay, so this is the sampling frequency, and then how many, what is the maximum number of dimension that I want to try? That is up to 12. And then tau is, sorry, here.
There is a raised hand. Chandan, would you like to take it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, actually the MATLAB window is not visible. We are only seeing your PPT.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing and. Can you see the MATLAB window?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so in the first part, sorry, I will do it again, but I don't have much time. So yeah, so first part I showed that the information of function of tau versus tau gives me the first minima at tau equal to 12 around. So I consider my optimum time lag to be 12. And in the next thing, I am actually calculating the minimum embedding dimension with the interpolated data and the sampling frequency. And I consider to test up to 10 dimension with a 12 optimum lag. And this 10 and 2 are the default values for relative tolerance and absolute tolerances. So if I do that, if I run the code, and again, I'm not going into the code because you have to read the paper to understand that. So where is that? Okay, so D, I have not plotted here. So I got a D value, D vector here with my false neighborhood informations. And if I plot it, you see that, yeah, at 4, it goes to 0. So at 3 also it has slightly false neighborhood positions. So I would consider my minimum embeddings dimension to be 4. Now considering that, so I have considered D to be 4 and tau to be, let's say, 12. And I now calculate the delayed vectors. Okay. So basically it is nothing but shifting your time series by this tau value and plotting it, plotting the attractor. Okay. So yeah, so it is somewhat CLT plus tau and CLT plus 2 tau. This is kind of one-dimensional attractor which we expect to get from the periodic dynamics. Okay, so till now, is it clear? So quickly, next I go to, I probably end my talk because I don't have time. So I quickly end my talk with the tool of recurrence plot. Recurrence plot is basically based on a binary matrix, and it is a time versus time plot which reveals that all the time when the phase space trajectory of the dynamical system visits roughly the same area. So by same area, what do we mean? We mean that we set a threshold for a particular trajectory. So let's say this solid black line is my concerned trajectory, and we set a threshold of epsilon and actually form a tube around it. And then we see that with time, what are the other trajectories of the system in the phase space comes within this threshold value. Okay. So, and we consider them to be a solid diagonal in this time versus time plot. So if it is periodic dynamics, your phase space trajectories will be exactly the same trajectory in the same space of a phase portrait, right? So for that, so basically the way we construct this plot is, yeah, so we see that xi minus xj for two different time in the same section of a phase space, we see that that distance is within the threshold or not. If it is within the threshold, we put a solid dot, or if it is not, we put a white dot. I mean, we make it empty. So that means that by this plot, with a very short length of the time history, we could identify different dynamics, which is not possible through the topological invariants, which like Lyapunov exponent or correlation dimension, which needs a long time history to converge. So here you can see that the first figure, we see a completely diagonal, all lines are diagonal and parallel to each other. That means that the dynamics is completely periodic, as all the trajectories are same, like they pass to the same place in the phase space. Then the second is indicative of a intermittency time history, where you see that we see separated isolated windows of diagonals, which confirms the periodic burst, and we see the broken windows, which confirms the chaotic sporadic burst, because in the chaos regime, your no trajectory, I mean, in the same section, the trajectory would pass from completely different paths, right? So it will almost never be within this threshold value, which is confirmed in the third plot. So in the chaotic time history, you would see that the recurrence plot would be completely consisting of broken lines, in contrast to the periodic dynamics. So this is the basic, and I will quickly also in few seconds I will form the time history that we are considering. If we plot the recurrence plot, if we form this binary matrix, which is written in this code, which I can share, and is also in that paper. So let's see. Yeah, so we get this. So you can first compare that the signal that we have considered for the test is this, and then the recurrence plot is almost diagonal lines, which is indicative of a periodic dynamics. If I would have considered an intermittent time history, I would have got a window of broken lines. Okay, so this is another tool, and probably it's a good idea to end with the next slide. Yeah, so the next, and maybe very quantitative tools to exactly point out what is the dynamics of these systems are different topological invariants of the attractors. So two most important measures are largest Lyapunov exponents. And as you all know that it is basically a quantitative measures of the exponential divergence of the trajectories in the chaotic system. So there are different algorithms. Two main algorithms to calculate this is Wolff's algorithm, another is Rosenstein algorithm. So the Wolff algorithm require you to have a closed form equation and their Jacobians to be completely determined. So you could have calculated the Jacobians from the closed form equation of your systems. But if you have a scalar time history, you don't have an option to do that. So then you could use this Rosenstein algorithm, which basically calculates the largest Lyapunov exponent from the average separation with the lag, or with the number of sample points, and you could plot this average separation for increasing embedding dimension. And when you see that for all the increasing embedding dimensions, they reach a plateau almost, or they remain parallel to each other, then you could calculate the slope of it and multiplied by the sampling frequency, you could determine the largest Lyapunov exponents, which is the largest among the Lyapunov spectrum that you get for your system. Okay, and of course a positive LLE value denotes that your system is chaotic. Negative value denotes that your system is periodic. And next is the correlation dimension. And a very well established algorithm to calculate this is the Grasberger-Prakasya algorithm, and where you calculate the correlation sum from your scalar time history, and from the slope of those correlation sum you could plot the dimension. And as you can see that this does not guarantee that your solution, your result is physical, unless you show a convergence test with the increasing embedding dimension. So you can see that 7 and 8 has almost remain same or converged. So since it is a chaotic system, it required at least 8 embedding dimension to make it converge. And this correlation dimension tells you if your correlation dimension is fraction or it is fractal, then your system is chaotic. If it is 1, your system is periodic. If it is perfectly 2, your system is quasi-periodic. So I would show you how to calculate that, but I don't have time to do that. So MATLAB has now their own inbuilt function for doing this phase space reconstruction. So you could simply use this command phase space reconstruction with the time history and lag and embedding dimension. You will get the reconstructed phase space. Then similarly, MATLAB has their inbuilt command now from 2020 version, I think, to calculate the Lyapunov exponent and correlation dimension. The command is correlation dimension of X and lag and dimension. And for Lyapunov exponent is command is Lyapunov exponent X and the other input parameter. So as you can see that they are also plotting the separation, and when it reaches a plateau, they are calculating the slope. Okay, so that's all. And I think I would not go into the synchronization as I don't have time. So I'm open to questions if you have any.
Are there any questions? Yes. Harishankar.
Hi, thanks for the very nice talk, first of all. So I have two questions. The first one is you began with differentiation between discrete systems and continuous systems, right? And essentially, when you're solving the continuous system using some numerical method, you're discretizing it. So is there actually any difference when you're using the code or writing the code down between them?
So you are talking for continuous system or discrete systems? Could you repeat your question? I didn't get it actually.
Harishankar, can you ask it again?
Yeah, sure. I was muted again. So when you're trying to solve a continuous system, you're again discretizing them, right? Yes. So once you discretize them, is there any essential difference between a discrete system and solving a continuous system?
Yes, of course. The approach is completely different. So the discrete dynamical systems are ideally or essentially is a recursive relationship. So where your xn plus 1 or the next step of the solution is actually function of xn. So the next time when xn plus 1 becomes xn, and then the system evolves. However, in the continuous system, it is governed by a differential equation, and you are discretizing the differential equation by different numerical techniques, such as it can be Euler, it can be Langaputta, or any other technique. So that is a discretizing the differential equation, but it is ideally governed by a continuous differential equation, right? And it is not recursive. That is the main difference.
Oh, right. So I had another question. In the logistic map case, so you saw some kind of a bifurcation, and then after beyond a point, you saw further bifurcations, and then that was the route to chaos. Similarly, in the Lorentz system, you see some kind of a periodic oscillation, and then there is some non-periodic uh, as an intermittency, and then that is the route to chaos. So does that mean that if a system is going to chaos, uh, sorry, if a system has such changes that you can observe that at a point there is some kind of bifurcation, so does it mean that the system will definitely go to chaos, or is there a chance it will go back to stability?
Of course, you cannot guarantee that it will go to chaos. In
Okay.
most of the cases, yes, it is. There is a route to chaos, but it can also happen. Even we have seen for at least our investigated systems that it can undergo, let's say, a secondary Hopf bifurcation where you see quasi-periodicity, but again, then it can come back to period one, or there can be some kind of crisis-like phenomena where your chaos also suddenly can come back to a period one solution, or it can diverge. So in nonlinear systems, it depends on the system and the system parameters what kind of route you would see. But there is, of course, some universal route to chaos, and there are universalities which are seen in many systems, and that's the way it has been classified by some local bifurcation route and global bifurcation routes. But there can be some other new system which can exhibit some other route. Who can say?
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And also, I would want to mention here that whatever I mentioned earlier are for continuous systems. So there are another class of systems which are discontinuous. So discontinuity induced bifurcations are a complete separate class of bifurcation and can show very abrupt changes, let's say from period one to chaos or something like that. And those are completely a different class of systems showing different behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Next question. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat box also. Anyone?
So Chandan, I had a question.
Sure.
So you showed see correlation dimension towards the end and the largest Lyapunov exponent and so on. And so in our experience, when we have used a correlation dimension or any other index that characterizes the nonlinear dynamical system, there are two things that challenge us. One is the amount of data that you require to get a reliable estimate.
Yes.
And second is when you have uncertainty or measurement noise in the data. These calculations, depending on what you are using, whether it's a correlation dimension or Lyapunov exponent and so on, they can be, the sensitivities can vary. Would you like to comment on this?
Yes, exactly. So that's, I think I briefly mentioned that when we come to the numerical calculation of this topological invariance, and as I showed that also it depends. I mean, the parameters that you mentioned, apart from that, it also depends on the number, the more higher dimension we are considering of the system. Right. Okay. So these are the uncertainties involved. So in most of the cases, I mean, from my own PhD research, I have experienced that when we are using a very high fidelity systems solving Navier-Stokes equation and FSI calculations, it's not very easy to generate a very long time series so that we can comment that it's ergodic in nature, or it's actually. So when I actually try to calculate, because everywhere I get question that you are So in chaos, you have to show a positive Lyapunov exponents to quantitatively prove it. So when I tried that, I miserably failed, because if I have something 100 periodic cycles of a data, the value of Lyapunov exponents I'm getting, it's still converging. It's not a converged value, and it is junk. So it's perfectly, I agree to that these topological invariants are only they give reliable results when you have a very long time history. That's why we resorted to these recurrence based tools, which on the other hand, like recurrence plot, it is just uses the recurrence property of the time history, and it's a very simple and neat algorithm to see quickly, even if you have 10 cycle of data. I mean, given that it is not transient, if you have 10 cycle of actual physical data, you could quickly visually see what kind of transition is happening, and based on that recurrence plot you could get some quantitative results, different recurrent measures like determination coefficient and laminarity length and so on, so which can give you a quantitative sense of that. So these tools we preferred for our analysis to conclusively show that, but of course we don't get the exact dynamical informations like correlation dimension or Lyapunov exponent.
Yeah, thanks. So just a follow up on that.
Yeah.
Now, yes, certainly recurrence plots are a lot more popular than these indices which have been used probably less widely. But even recurrence plots, the concern is if you have measurement errors, how sensitive are the recurrence plots to that?
Yes.
Are there
and
issues?
The algorithm changes for a noisy data. So the pioneers in this are who have given the algorithms. They have also, like Norbert Marwan and their group, they have also did successive studies that for a noisy data, what kind of changes we require in the algorithm, and so that we can tackle these uncertainties.
Okay. So the last question that I have is, so typically when I read the literature on the use of these tools, whether it's recurrence plots and the other indices and so on, especially from data, I don't see a very formal hypothesis test setup. Typically, I mean, as approaching from a statistical viewpoint, there could be a hypothesis. For example, if you are hypothesizing that the system is periodic, that the time series has periodicity, ideally a hypothesis test should be set up, and then a test statistic which you could derive from a recurrence plot or from a Lyapunov exponent, whatever you choose to, should be used, should be chosen, and then the way you carry out a hypothesis test should be done. For example, you may need to know the distribution of that statistic and so on. How much of such an effort has gone into the analysis of nonlinear, data-driven analysis of nonlinear dynamical system? Do you see a lot of literature setting up hypothesis tests and coming up? Because whatever inference ultimately you draw, you cannot be 100% confident.
Sure. Yeah.
So so there is a degree of confidence that I don't see being reported. Are there portions of the literature in which this is done?
I don't think so. As far as my knowledge is limited, the literatures I have read, you are correct. I mean, there is, I don't know if you, by meaning hypothesizing, are you meaning establishing some close form relationships?
No. So as a very simple thing, suppose I want to say that there is going to be, let's say that chaos, the system will exhibit chaos. Okay.
Yes.
Now you will, as a statistician, as a data scientist, what you would do is you would convert that statement, that descriptive statement, to a statement on some parameter taking on some value. Okay. So whatever chaos is characterized by, or even if you leave that aside, let's take another example. Let's say we are looking at periodicity.
Yes. Now,
the periodicity, let's say the hypothesis that you want to test is that the series exhibits periodicity. Now, if you want to do a rigorous analysis of that, implementation of that, then you will have to convert that statement to some statement on a parameter that characterizes the periodicity, whatever you choose. Okay. So a hypothesis test for, let us say theta is a parameter that characterizes the periodicity. And let's say that whenever theta is 0, there is periodicity. If theta is not 0, there is no periodicity, something like that. So a hypothesis test correspondingly would say theta is 0 versus the alternative theta is not equal to 0. Now this theta has to be estimated, and in order to test this hypothesis, you will need to know the distribution of that statistic, and then you come out at a certain significance level, you either reject or not reject the hypothesis. So this is a very formal way of detection of anything. If you turn to detection theory, that is what essentially the formal setup is. And I see that in a nonlinear dynamical system analysis, even I have seen in the seismic data analysis literature and so on. In seismic data analysis, for example, you are interested in detecting the arrival of earthquake, which is typically signaled by the arrival of a P wave, the first wave that arrives. There also, there are many tools that are used, but a formal hypothesis test is not presented. Only if we set up a formal hypothesis test, it is possible to ascertain the degree of confidence with which we are arriving at a particular inference. And my observation is that such an approach or such a formal approach seems to be missing from the nonlinear dynamical systems literature, data-driven analysis of nonlinear dynamical systems. So am I right, or are there portions of the literature which do take this rigorous approach?
I mean, as far as the literature that I have read, I did not see such a formal hypothesis that you are meaning to. But what I can say is that for our kind of approach or numerical simulation, I mean, if it is experiment, I think by the distribution analysis or the statistical analysis, you mean that we will do the same thing many times, right? Then we will get a distribution.
Yes.
But for us, it's not possible. I mean, in the sense that we are limited by the prohibitive simulation cost that we have. So to simulate, like it is analogically equivalent to like we have how many realization we have for a stochastic process, let's say, and then we calculate the distribution.
But that is where the fantastic bootstrapping methods have come to the rescue in the modern times. Where you do numerical experiments, you don't do real experiments. You may not even have to actually, of course, with simulations, maybe you can do Monte Carlo simulations, but if the simulations are also very costly in time, in computational effort, then there are again bootstrapping methods that allow you to generate data, resample the data once you have a single realization, right? And that is the modern way of determining the distribution, or first generating so-called surrogate data, and then from the surrogate data you come up with the sampling distribution. So my suggestion is that,
but I have a doubt here. So if we have a perfectly deterministic system and we have chosen a system parameter, and then how many times we do the same simulation, and if our simulation technique is robust enough, we will end up with the same dynamics, isn't it?
So then the statistics actually, then all the discussion that was there does not apply to a purely deterministic system, right?
I see. Yeah.
But
so the kind of system I discussed here is showing a deterministic route to chaos. There was no stochasticity involved. But of course, we are also doing studies where our flow field is fluctuating. We are inputting stochastic gust or stochastic processes, modeling the flow field as stochastic processes. There, of course, probably we have to think of this.
Yeah, no, then there is no question of probably, then this has to be taken. If it's a purely deterministic system, then whatever I said does not apply.
Yes, so the present content that I presented is perfectly deterministic system. There was no stochasticity.
Okay, anyway, right. Thank you. That was a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So if there are no other questions, then maybe we can close this session very quickly. Any other questions? Okay, no. So thank you so much, Chandan, once again.
One question is there from Asifa. What should one
Okay,
keep in
Chandan.
mind if recurrence tools are to be used for noisy time histories? Yeah, so the main culprit for the getting wrong results through the recurrence plots or recurrence analysis is the threshold that we choose, and we actually use some thumb rules or some prescribed values of this threshold from experience by the experts or the developers, and we follow that. So one thing is that if the tube, the size of the tube that I mentioned, if I make it bigger or make it narrower, I can predict a wrong dynamics. So that we had to tune it based on the system. So when it becomes a noisy system, it is very difficult to choose what should be my proper or accurate threshold so that I can predict the realistic dynamics. So I think that is the main challenge there. And there, as I said, there is a paper by Norbert Marwan and group that how to predict noisy dynamics using recurrence plots. And there are very nice discussions on what are the challenges and what should be rectified in the main algorithm. I can refer that paper to you, Asif. Okay, ma'am. Thank you then.
Yeah, no more questions, I think. Okay, thank you, Chandan. It was very nice to have you with us, and thanks a lot for agreeing to give this very nice tutorial talk. I think it was quite
always happy.
enjoyable. Okay, thank you so much. Hope you will continue to stay and enjoy the rest of the talks that are lined up for today. Today is the last day, so yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for taking.
Thank you.